Welcome to the live broadcast, streaming across the globe, live from St. Paul, Minnesota, Twin Cities. We all know that Tishrei is slowly approaching. A few more days going to be Rosh HaShana, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, etc. And what better way to celebrate these Yom Tovim, the Yom Noraim, with memories that are not just memories, but memories that we have to internalize, and that way properly celebrate Rosh HaShana, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, etc. So we have with us someone who has lived those years with the Rebbe, many years as a bacher himself, and these are times that we all need to try to reflect on and try to relive those days, and that is the best way to celebrate the Yom Tovim. So I'm proud, and it's my honor and privilege to introduce fellow Shliach, Rabbi Mendel Feller, who will be presenting and talking to us about Tishrei with the Rebbe. He has a lot to offer. I've heard this presentation myself a few years ago, and I'm very excited to hear it again. Without further ado, Rabbi Feller.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Goldberg, and indeed, good morning to the Kinderlach here, and good morning to the Kinderlach and the soldiers of Tzivos Hashem across the globe. And we'll try to, in the short amount of time that we have allotted, to at least do a little taste or a little covering of the points, the main points that there are. And like Rabbi Goldberg said at the outset, this is not just something of memories, but it's something that by Yomim Elul is Karim Benasim. These are things that happen now. Everything that the Rebbe did for Chassidim and things that I saw when I was there, that Rebbe is doing now for us. And that's why it's so important to know what is happening and what is done. And I'm going to start with a fast forward, and then we'll go backwards a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit later about Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur, there was the avodah of the Kohen Gadol. We'll see something about that afterwards. Kohen Gadol, and we read about that in the davening. We're going to talk about that soon. But I want to just say one little point, and that is the Kohen Gadol, one of the things he had to do was read from the Torah. And when he finished reading, we say this in the davening in Yom Kippur, it says, more than what I read is what is really written here, right? Because he only read a little bit of the Torah. The Torah is a big Torah. So we're going to talk here today about a little bit of how it was by the Rebbe, but there's so much more. So even if somebody heard my presentation, I don't make presentations. I don't know what that means. But if we can all reflect on this a little bit, there's always so much more. And I don't know everything. I almost know nothing. But what little bit that I know, I'm going to try to share. And then you'll find in Sfarim, a new beautiful book came out called Tishrei with the Rebbe. You read that, and the more and more you read, and as we get older, the Kinderlach, you'll be able to live this more and more and more, because the Rebbe is today stronger than he was then when I was there. So there's so much more to get from the Rebbe today. Like the Rebbe himself said, that every year the Rebbe is stronger and more alive and more active. So Tishrei, we already started. We're today in the second day of Shlichus. So let's just say the Orchim started to arrive around Chai Elul. Guests came from all over the world. And I always used to like to say, here's Carousel D, here's Carousel C, because you always saw a lot of luggages and suitcases and valises all over the place till people found a place to stay and didn't find a place to stay and a bench and this and that. Now, why is that important? Because 770 started to fill up, and it was always very packed in the whole Tishrei. And the Rebbe Fabreng many times on Chai Elul, and that we had already over a week ago. Now, the first real Tishrei experience was Selichos, the first night of Selichos, and of course the Shabbos of Selichos called Shabbos Selichos. There was always a Fabrengen because it has the significance of Shabbos Mevorchim, and every Shabbos Mevorchim the Rebbe Fabrenged from before he became Rebbe. When he was just Fabrenging, there was something like a little kiddish upstairs in 770, a little bit like some of you have in your shuls across the globe, with a little bit of heading and this, and the Rebbe was like, that's how it started out, believe it or not. And then it came, the Rebbe became Rebbe, etc., and that grew. So there was always a Farbrengen. Farbrengen was very, very special. Farbrengen before Rosh HaShana, the Shabbos before Rosh HaShana. Shabbos Slichas sometimes could be 2 Shabbos before Rosh HaShana. But let's not get into that now. Slichas always was at 1 o'clock in the morning. 1 o'clock in the morning at Chatzois, right after Chatzois. And the Beis Medrash was very full. Later years, the Rebbe spoke about how Chassidim sometimes were farbrengen the whole time leading up to Slichas. Really, in the Rishimis, it says that those farbrengens is a reference to farbrengen during the days of Slichas, and in the morning, and actually during Aseret Simei Tshuva. But that's already a whole nother discussion. I digress. The Rebbe came in, even though there was dancing and singing sometimes before the Rebbe came. But as soon as it came 1 o'clock, and we heard shh, suddenly it got quiet. Everyone stood in their place. And it was like an ocean split. And the Rebbe walked to his place, and the Chazan began, and you knew that Tishrei was here, right? And then that was the first part of Tishrei. Everyone saying Slichas with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, in the later years, in the earlier years, the Rebbe used to come in with the red Slichas book. Today, the Slichas books look a little different. In later years, they had special blown up sheets of Slichas for the Rebbe to read, because it was easier to read, and the Rebbe came in with those pages on his place. And Chassidim had a tough task whenever they were davening with the Rebbe, because the Rebbe spoke about that he doesn't want you to look at the Rebbe when you're davening. You have to look in the Siddur, but every once in a while you have a glimpse and you see it. When you finished your paragraph, you look at the Rebbe, and suddenly you realize you're much smarter and you're much holier. You realize you could think about the Rebbe, the Tzir Pnei Harav. And when the Rebbe was davening, you didn't even see his holy face for the most part. Just the Rebbe standing by the stender. And the Rebbe davening was a little wake-up call. And that's something that we all could have every davening that we have, all the time. Because this is how a person serves the Eibishter in such a way. So, the Slichas was a tone setter in a certain sense. That's how things started. Now, there used to be announcements, and when I say the later years, I mean Tafshinun Aleph and Tafshinun Beis. That those were the last years that the Rebbe was walking into Slichas, and there were already announcements in the late Mems. It's hard for you to think of the years. These are not the years like there's Moshe Rabbeinu and Yeshua and the Mishnah and the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch, right? And the Baal Shem Tov and the Rebbe. This didn't happen too long ago, right? It's not too long ago, not in the not too distant past. And they made an announcement. They said, look, since so many Orchim are coming, and some people can't come till actually Erev Rosh HaShana. So it was customary in the earlier years, that Rebbe was the Nesias that we went in was over 40 years. In the earlier years, the crowd wasn't as big as it was later on. So everybody came to the Rebbe on Rosh Hashanah. There's a minhag that you give the tzaddik, to the Rebbe, a kvittel, a pan, a pidyon nefesh. And that is a special letter that we write to the Rebbe. And we write pan, and we're asking that the Rebbe davens for us on Rosh HaShana Yom Kippur, because when a tzaddik davens, it's so special. And the Rebbe would actually, that you didn't have to send in through the mail unless you were out of town, or through the Rebbe's secretary, because when you had a letter, you used to bring it to the Rebbe's secretaries. And they brought the Rebbe all the letters. So even whether it came in the mail, or even when people lived in New York and they wanted to bring it in, they came to the office and they gave a letter. But Erev Rosh Hashanah was the exception, that the Rebbe himself stood at the door, at his doorway, and you can see now the picture. And when the Rebbe stood in his doorway near the mezuzah, and there was a big, big line, and the line stretched outside. There's a little doorway behind the Rebbe's office, outside, and it would go all the way to the corner, and sometimes it went around the corner, and sometimes it went even around the next corner. It was a very long line, but it went pretty quickly, because everybody got a moment, and it started. So a few elderly chassidim would start, and everybody would give the Rebbe the letter in their hand. And when they came, the Rebbe usually would either say, Aksiva B'chsima Toiva, L'shona Toiva Musuki. Look you in your eye. And the Rebbe took it. Now you see here in the Rebbe's left hand, he's holding the stack of the letters because he took everybody's letter with his Halike right hand. So when you came there, you with your right hand held the pan and you looked at the Rebbe for 1 second, a split second. You come by and give the Rebbe the letter, and the Rebbe would say, and every time the Rebbe put it in his hand. Now what happened was, every half a minute or a minute or so, you can imagine the stack got bigger and bigger. So the Rebbe would stop for a second, and inside his office, you see on the other side of the door, he had a little place where he put them down. And then he kept on going. In later years, the Rebbe said that it is so special. It's like when it goes into the computer system, the Rebbe said sometimes, I'm not even going to read this. I'm going to daven, and everything that you ask for, I'm going to daven for, and it's all going to be there. And therefore, a pan, a pidyon nefesh, also goes with tzedakah. So the tzedakah that was given, they said, put it in a separate envelope, or they had a big bag or a big pushka, a big basket, and you put the tzedakah separate so that they didn't have to open up and separate out the tzedakah from the letter. Now, because the crowd grew so much, so in the middle of the Tov Shemem, they said the Rebbe is going to start taking panim even before Erev Rosh HaShana. It always used to be only Erev Rosh HaShana. After Shlichus in the morning, there would be panim. And they asked that the Bachrim who are learning in New York and in 770, they should come right away. Everyone should go, whoever could, the first day when it was possible. Then they said, let's say people came in 3 days before Rosh HaShana or 2 days before Rosh HaShana. Everybody should go as soon as they could. The Rosh HaShana, people who arrived on Erev Rosh HaShana. And then the Rebbe would be a little easier on the Rebbe too, so the Rebbe wouldn't have to stand for, let's say, 6 hours at once. He would stand one day for an hour or two, another day an hour or two, another day an hour or two, another day an hour or two. And in the Tavshin and Aleph, basically, might be wrong in these years, but the Rebbe even took panim on Motzei Shabbos after Shlichus. So the panim started right away, and here you sometimes you see also children came and gave a pan if they were old enough, and very special thing, because the Rebbe would bring those panim to and daven by his Rebbe, and he would also daven with them throughout Rosh Hashanah. We don't know exactly what the Rebbe did, and you know what? That's really not our business. The Rebbe did what the Rebbe has to do, because people say, "Oh, he used to bring them by." We'll talk a little later about what happened by Tkiyah Shofar, but it's if you make a very simple mathematical geometrical equation, that all the pans that were brought down by Tkiyah Shofar. It's just impossible. It's physically impossible. So unless we say there was some kind of a miracle, but that's he brings all the panim there. Some people say maybe it was a representation of some panim, some old panim. We don't know, but that doesn't matter. It was 3 packages. We'll talk about it later on. But that the Rebbe took the pan. The Rebbe is saying, "I'm here for you. I love each and every year, and you can come." And you have to understand that when a chassid wrote that letter, so everyone said, "Oy vey, I'm going to ask the Rebbe to daven for me. I better shape up a little bit. I better shape up. I can't just get a pan Rebbe. Here it's mamish Rebbe standing and waiting, taking from my hand a letter." So people made hachonas, preparation to write upon, and here the Rebbe says, "I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to daven for you." Like the Rebbe said when it was the first yahrzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he officially said he's going to be the Rebbe. He says, "I'm going to help you, but you're going to work hard." And that's what the Rebbe asks each and every one of us, that we do what we have to do. And the pan, he stood by his door and he said, "I'm going to accept this from you. I'm going to daven for you also, but you're going to daven, and that'll be the keli. That'll be the vessel for this special bracha." So this was Erev Rosh Hashanah. Ahead, because I see the time is running faster than I wanted to run. And Rosh Hashanah by night, we know by Chassidim, by Rebbes, there was a whole thing. Certain Rebbes, there's stories about the Frierdiker Rebbe that they davened for 2 hours, even in 770, even when he came to America. and the whole tablecloth was wet from his tears, and this. Chassidim, after the davening finished, he stayed for a couple hours more. The Rebbe Rashab used to daven like that, and whatever. School the avoid of Rosh HaShana. Our Rebbe took everything to a different level, to a different extreme. And let me talk a little bit about how our Rebbe daven Ma'ariv on Rosh HaShana. So you understand that everyone came in and daven Mincha, whatever. Then it was time before the Ma'ariv time. The shul was packed. Everyone had a machzer, packed, standing, sitting in the middle. Oh, wait a minute. I fast forwarded. I see that I cut to the chase faster than I wanted to cut to the chase. Erev Rosh Hashanah, we have our own thing. We'll get back to Ma'ariv in a minute. So, because we were talking about the panim, Erev Rosh Hashanah was itself a longer slichus, and all time in till Tavshim Memches, the Rebbe used to come for slichus at exactly 7 o'clock. The Rebbe would come into slichus, and slichus ended at 7:30, and that's when Chassidus started for the Bochrim. Now, in later years, it was a little different times, but the Rebbe always came to slichus. But I want to tell you there was something special about Erev Rosh Hashanah. Something was very, very special. The Rebbe, till Tavshim Memches Chav Beishvat, didn't daven Shachris with the Olam. The Olam actually had a minyan in the morning. The Rebbe would only come in by Kriyas HaTorah time, upstairs to the Bochrim's minyan, sometimes downstairs, on Monday and Thursday, or Rosh Chodesh, or another day like that. And then the Rebbe would actually hear the Torah reading, and he would went out. If it was a day that he said Kaddish, there were several days like that in the year, including Chav Gimel Elul, which is the day that we had last week. That was his Zayda's Yortzeit, so he stayed till the end of the davening. But the Rebbe davened Shachris in his room, which I want to just talk about one more thing, because after the davening in Elul, you always blow shofar. Sometimes some Bachim were able to hear the Rebbe blowing shofar in his room when he finished davening himself. That was something very special. Hardly ever you could hear it, but sometimes you heard, if it was quiet upstairs in 770, you heard a little bit, and the sound of the shofar coming out of the Rebbe's room, because the Rebbe was blowing for himself shofar when he finished davening for himself. We don't know why the Rebbe chose to daven like that, and why in Tavshim Memches he was the chazan, and then he started to come down with the olam till always. Why am I telling you all this? Because Erev Rosh Hashanah was one of the days that he did daven with a minyan. The Rebbe davened with a minyan. Erev Rosh Hashanah, Erev Yom Kippur, Purim, and on Tisha B'Av he came down, and then the days that he had Yartzeit. Vav Tishri Chav Vav and Yud Shvat, and then later Chav B'Shvat, but that wasn't the Chiddush. So it was a special thing that the Rebbe was coming down and Talis and Tefillin. You hardly ever saw that. And then after the davening, minyan of the Rav and some elder Chassidim would sit down, and the Rebbe performed the Hataras Nadorim like we all do before anyone did it. And after the Rebbe went out, then everyone started to do it. And the Rebbe would say the Hataras Nadorim. You could see videos of that, and as is known. Afterwards, the Rebbe would go to the mikveh, and then the Rebbe would go to the oil. Chassidim also went to the oil on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and that was one of the 2 days in the year that you could see the Rebbe in the oil, like you see in the picture. There's one of the pictures that the Rebbe is in the oil and the Chassidim in the oil. And the reason for that is because on Erev Rosh Hashanah it says in Shulchan Aruch that you should go to the oil. It says you go to your relatives' grave, and you should go also to Kivrei Tzadikim, and they will daven for you. So everybody went. The Rebbe went also. So that was the one day. The other day was Yud Shvat. Sometimes the Rebbe said to go to the oil, and the yard said of the Rebbe's Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And sometimes the Rebbe came at the time when still there were people there, but otherwise no one was there when the Rebbe was at the oil. And then the Rebbe would come back, and now we can get, there was a mincha, and now we'll get back to that Ma'ariv that I was talking about. So when it was the evening of Rosh Hashanah, it was quiet in shul, and when the Rebbe came in, we'll get to the shofars afterwards. When the Rebbe came in to Ma'ariv, there usually was not even a nigun. Sometimes there was a nigun when the Rebbe came in. Rosh Hashanah is a solemn time. It's a serious time. And the Rebbe came in, and the Rebbe went to his place in front of the shul. And this is how it worked. Every other time, as soon as the Rebbe turned around, if it was a Freilich day or a Shabbat, sometimes the Rebbe even turned around and made it with his hand to continue singing. Sometimes the Rebbe would just put on a stender and stop, and they started davening. The night of Rosh HaShana, there was something different. And it was a very interesting thing. Something so awesome. The Rebbe came to his place, and the Rebbe usually was standing. I don't know if he ever sat by this. The Rebbe opened up a Tehillim and started to say Tehillim. And everyone else had a Tehillim. If you had some of the Machzorim have a Tehillim in the back. Everyone started to say Tehillim then, before Ma'ariv started. And we knew now it's time to say Tehillim, and we didn't know when Ma'ariv was going to start. The Rebbe could say Tehillim for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it was. And it was such a serious time. Rosh HaShana is one of the only days, Rosh HaShana Yom Kippur, that you say Tehillim also at night. The rest of the year, you're really not supposed to say it at night, till after Chatzos, or early in the morning you could say, and during the day you're supposed to say Tehillim. Now, if there's an emergency, whatever reason, you could say Tehillim, whatever it is, or whatever. But like this, you don't say Tehillim at night. But Rosh HaShana Yom Kippur, the Rebbe writes, you say Tehillim. And the Rebbe used to say before the davening, Tehillim, Tehillim, Tehillim. And that's how everyone started to say Tehillim. Now, obviously, it wasn't an hour and a half, and it wasn't enough time to finish the whole Tehillim. Many people started their Rosh HaShana Tehillim then, and then at a certain point, the Rebbe would close it. The Rebbe would go like on the beam, and they would go, usually with his left hand actually, and he would go like this, and they would sing, ay, 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 and he sang Avinu Malkeinu before Ma'ariv started. Ay, 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 ay. Right? The Niggin of Avinu Malkeinu. And everyone sang it with great Yislavus. Everyone, you Rosh HaShana, Yom Adin, Yom Adin. This is how it started. Tehillim. Niggin of Avinu Malkeinu with the Rebbe. One time, sometimes a second time, sometimes a third time, different years, different ways. And after that, then the Chazan started Shir HaMalos. Or if it was Friday night, Mizmor LaDavid. So that was, and then they davened, not fast, but the Rebbe davened with dominion, with everybody. And it's a longer Shemana Esrei. And then when the Rebbe went out, first there was an announcement, you're supposed to say, Lashona Toiva Tekose V'Sichosen. And when the Rebbe left the shul, the Rebbe would look at, like as he was walking the whole way out, he was just looking at people and looking at everyone saying, Shona Toiva Tekose V'Sichosen, Shona Toiva Tekose V'Sichosen. And some people, when the Rebbe passed by them, the Rebbe couldn't pass by everybody because there was such a big crowd. They would say, they would mouth closer to the Rebbe, they would say, Shona Toiva Tekose V'Sichosen. But the Rebbe would say, Shona Toiva Tekose V'Sichosen, and his way out of shul. Okay. Now let's talk about the next morning. Morning, Rosh HaShana. Oh, wow. So first of all, we're aware that the Rebbe was the one who blew the shofar. The Rebbe was the Baltikeh, the Rebbe blew shofar. And to blow shofar, and the Rebbe blowing shofar, this is something that's really indescribable. And we can only just talk about it a little bit. And I know in one of the pictures, there's even a picture of the various shofars that the Rebbe had. And these shofars were almost from the Tzemach Tzedek, and it was from his father. And the Rebbe had himself a shofar, and then they bought the Rebbe a special shofar when it was harder for the Rebbe to blow. The Rebbe had several shofars. One of the shofars really wasn't even good anymore to blow, but the Rebbe brought it anyway. So this is a whole different story, and we have these shofars. These shofars are sometimes seen. Now, before we get into that, the Rebbe made something called Mivtza Shofar, which we all do, and that is to blow shofar for Yidden. So Bachram already went, and here was the thing: you had to have a place, a good place. It was a whole thing how you had a place. Chazokis, Yazeda had a place, this had a place, and the first 5 rows in front of the bima where the Rebbe blew shofar, this was old Chazokis, old things for years and years. The same people stood there forever. But you could get a little further back, or if somebody was away 1 year, or somebody let somebody in. That was the time that it was the most not pushy, but crowded squeezed together so many people in such a small place. And a lot of the people, even though they had a place there, but they wanted to go mivtzoyim. And here, I know maybe some of the cities around the globe where you do mivtzoyim, they do it in the afternoon. Walk to hospitals, nursing homes, different centers, shopping, wherever people, Jews are, to blow shofar for them. But New York, the minhag then in those years, and maybe even now, was to go early in the morning, to blow shofar in the morning in hospitals. The davening didn't start at 7 till 10 o'clock. And so people would leave already 6 o'clock in the morning and walk an hour or two, or they left 5:30 in the morning, and they walked then an hour or two to hospitals all around. And they had it's called a Jewish list, and it's the blow shofar, right? But here, some of them would come back 10:30 to 7:70. And to get to their place, this looked very funny, but sometimes, I remember a few times, that a bocher actually just had to, like, the place was already so crowded, he had to, like, climb on top of the shoulders and then try to, like, whittle his way into the place where he was supposed to be, because the guys couldn't even make him room to go into his place. This is how it was. And one time a bocher was doing that, and then it was so pushy, and he got stuck. So for a few minutes, it was a very funny sight. Imagine a bunch of guys standing around this tall, whatever, and then one guy up because he can't fall down to the floor. So he's stuck in this is really what was going on over there. I can't describe it. That's besides later. This is before anything happens. So, and don't forget, this is Rosh HaShana, and there's a davening going on, and everyone has a little machzer. A big machzer, no room for a big machzer at 770. Little machzer. And the Rebbe, when the Rebbe came in the morning, I actually had the chus to see several times how the Rebbe comes in the morning, Rosh Hashanah, and the Rebbe came in, usually when the Rebbe came in, the davening Yom Tiv, and even Sukkot, the Rebbe didn't come in with his lulav, they brought it to him later. The Rebbe just came in with a siddur. Even a chumash was already by the Rebbe's place, Tillim was by the Rebbe's place. Later the Rebbe came with a Tillim also. So the Rebbe came on Rosh Hashanah, he had his Heilige Siddur, then he had a machzer, then the Rebbe had another Siddur, a special, different kind of Siddur with kavonis, a Kabbalah Siddur. Then the Rebbe also had a package. Now the package was made from a nice type of a big handkerchief type thing, but really more like the thing that covered up the Rebbe's. You've seen how it covers up the Rebbe's cake, but if I bring in a white challah cover. So this is how the Rebbe carried the shofars, and here there's a picture of that. And the Rebbe would put all the shofars like together, and I don't think he brought all of them all of the time. He brought maybe 3 or 4 out of those shofars that we see, but maybe he had more. I couldn't count it. When he walked by, obviously it was covered up. Because there you see there's a picture how they're like bunched together, but he came in, but he was holding that as a package. And also, the Rebbe had something else very special, and that is he also had a red handkerchief. Well, it wasn't really, it was more of a shreds of a handkerchief. It was a tattered handkerchief because it came from the Tzemach Tzedek. And sometimes we could see a piece of that. Sometimes the Rebbe would put that on. Later, I'll tell you about that. But you could see it somewhere, sometimes sticking out, a little red hanging out from within this white package. But you knew the Rebbe's holding shofar. So the Rebbe came in, basically, he had the siddur and the other siddur under the arm, and like another, and he was really using both of his hands to bring in the stuff. But like the shofar was tucked in, and he had another hand. But the Rebbe was coming with all that. Now, what about the other packages? So the Rebbe's secretaries, the maskirim, they would bring in. Rabbi Groner would hold 2 packages, and I'll tell you about the package in a moment. And Rabbi Klein had a package, and the best way to describe those packages is if you were to think of, you ever see from the matzah bakery what 2 pounds of matzah wrapped in the brown paper with a string around it looks like? That's the best way to describe the packages. Maybe it more looked like a 3-pounder. It was a little bigger than a 2-pound, but it was with brown paper, and it had string tied around it so that you're able to hold it. And here the matzah comes in boxes, but sometimes you've seen it inside the box. Sometimes there's paper or something, you can get it in the paper. That's how it was held, and it had the string. They held it from the top in the string. Now I'm calling it packages. Some people like to call it panim, but I am specifically, deliberately calling it packages because I don't know what was in there. And I don't know if the Rebbe writes specifically that it was just panim. Some are of the opinion there were other things, maybe other chveitzim from Rabbeim in there. I don't know. I wasn't there. But whatever it was, the Rebbe didn't open the package in front of us. But those packages the Rebbe had with him by Tkiyas. Now, the Rebbe davened in front of the shul at his place. But when it came time to do the Tkiyas, now it was a little bit different the first day and the second day. Because on the second day, I'm going to jump ahead for a moment. The second day, Rosh HaShana, the Rebbe said Kaddish. And therefore, the Rebbe said Kaddish by the Sefer Torah on the second day. But on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe would, they would call up the Rebbe for Maftir, because the Rebbe had Maftir every day. And when the Rebbe went up for Maftir, he already brought up the stuff for the Tkiyah Shofar. So even though they called up Yameh, right? And then the Rebbe would turn around. So first of all, it was very hard, but everyone pushed on one side and on the other side, so there was a split place for the Rebbe to walk by. And actually, my place was I had a very good place, Baruch Hashem, especially the last 4 years, and you could see the Rebbe walk right by there, so I was able to look and look at, try to see what I could see from the package. The Rebbe walked right by me, right by me, and the other Bachim who were next to me were Young Light, and we were actually on a little bit of a raised platform too, so that because we were shorter, so we were able to see, and it was like in the 10th row to the Rebbe's right in front. So, but as soon as the Rebbe passed, boom, it became. Actually, there's a slang word they call it the washing machine. And it's hard to describe because if I tell you that this is something that naturally happens when there's too many people in a place that's not made for it, and it just like sways, and sometimes suddenly the whole thing goes, and you even hear like, oh, you have to take a few steps this way and a few steps that way until it stabilizes again. I don't think even science books talk about this because they never went through this. But there's such a phenomenon that happens. Some smoke can go up. Anyway, that's all shtusin, not a sky. Let's talk about the real thing. The Rebbe said maftir, and there's not enough time to go through all of this like we really should. But after the maftir, suddenly you saw the Rebbe's halakha face was like suddenly turned. If I could describe, if someone asked me, "What is a malach? What do you think a malach looks like?" I don't know if I ever saw a malach. Maybe we did see a malach. Maybe the guy in the grocery store was a malach, but that's not the malach that we're talking about. Suddenly the Rebbe became Mo'iyim. It was like unbelievable the way his face looked at that time as he was going to start to prepare for the blowing of the shofar. And after he finished, the Rebbe had just a whole system how he wanted everything on the bima in front. The panim here, and one on the left, and one on the right, and one more in the middle, and the shofar is in the front, and then he had his siddurim. He had a machzer, his siddur, and another siddur. And then, so the Rebbe would stand and start arranging this here stuff on the bima in front of him, and it was quiet in the shul. Now, before, there was always an announcement, and a special announcement was made by the Gabbai. His name was Moshe Pinchas Katz. His son is today the Gabbai also, and he used to say that, he said you shouldn't push around, and it should everything has to be in an orderly fashion. But he used to say a whole announcement, and then he would look up. If those who remember him, he would look up sort of at the ceiling, and he would finish off the announcement by saying, mistake. You have to know where you are and in front of whom you're standing. So you should understand that even if your Yetzer Hara acts up a little bit, realize the awesomeness of this moment and the awesomeness of this place and the awesomeness of who is here, the one who's going to be blowing shofar. And we can bring on what that really means for a long time that we don't have the time right now. But in the later years, people used to actually say it with him because they already knew that he's going to finish with that, and maybe they needed to drive that home a little bit more. And anyway, and of course, that is the minhag today of the Gabbayim, and the Sanzos Angezun says it, and everyone says that. So that's a very special part of Tkiyas that was before it started. And then So when the Rebbe was setting everything up, it was before it really started. And then the Rebbe would just suddenly, and did something very interesting, something that we never saw any other time. I would say it's a fourth cousin of duchening, because by duchening the Rebbe would put a talus only over his face. Here the Rebbe would suddenly take his talus before he started, and he would just put his whole talus, like he would stretch out his hands, and the whole talus would come over the whole situation there on the bima. So over the packages and over the shofris and over this, and the Rebbe had a siddur, but you couldn't. All you saw was the Rebbe's holding, and the Rebbe was like holding it down, actually over those things. And sometimes maybe he moved away his hands, but you didn't see the Rebbe's face, and the talus was much wider than a person's face because it was covering up the other things. And it was sometimes the Rebbe even tucked it in a little bit under the so that you couldn't see really anything. Then after that, the Rebbe would pick it up. And how much time? Every time different. What the Rebbe did there? Ilu Yadayte Vayisiv, right? I would know. So we don't know, but the Rebbe did. What do you have to do? And then the Rebbe would say, Lam Natseyach Lindekeirach Mizmeir. He started, and that's when people started to say 7 times Lam Natseyach. And then I don't have here the Machzer, but, and there are people who know better how the Rebbe said the psukim than I know. But after that, after 7 times reading, the Rebbe would say the psukim. You have to understand that at that moment, in 770, everyone was, even people whose Yetzer Hara worked harder, their Yetzer Hara couldn't help it but run away at this time. It didn't matter who you were. Even the biggest Yetzer Haras flunked at that time. It was impossible for the Yetzer Hara to even rear its ugly head. And that was the Yesodus that people try to take from that time. It was like you're in Gan Eden. You see that? It's unbelievable. And the Rebbe would start the psukim, the min hametzar, and it was loud enough, and you heard it, and everyone answered, and he went through all the psukim. And I want to just go ahead after he did that, and he said the brachas, right? And Shmoya Koil Shofar, and he said Shachianu. Then I want to go a little bit to how the Rebbe held the shofar, even though I don't have a shofar here. But I want to just point out something important, because I was somewhere recently, and someone said, "Oh, how did the Rebbe hold the shofar?" They thought the Rebbe held it with his hand over here, and like the shofar coming up and holding it like this. I said, absolutely not. The Rebbe held the shofar like this, and this end was here, and then sometimes he had the left hand, and sometimes not, but he was holding the shofar like this, and the Rebbe's head was a little bit bent, because if you see the shofars in the picture, some of them you have to have it bent when you blow it, because otherwise it's not the kind that stands up straight. But the Rebbe's head was only bent a little bit, and then the Rebbe's face was red, and the Rebbe also took his talus and it was over his ears, sometimes also a little bit. So the talus didn't get in the way, and the Rebbe was blowing. Now sometimes the Rebbe started to blow the shofar, and nothing was going on. There's different years, different things happen, and sometimes it went so smooth, and sometimes I remember one year, I believe it was Tafshinun, that it was so hard to keep track of what order, where the Rebbe is really up to in blowing the shofar, and Rosh includes the whole thing, and it was so hard to keep track, and the there was next to the Rebbe, there was somebody pointing in the siddur what you're supposed to be blowing, and he saw, at that point was pointing after the Rebbe blew, not before. And then when the Rebbe finished, the Rebbe said, he said those psukim, and afterwards the Rebbe went back to his place. And there's a union to see the face of the Tekeh, even no matter where you are, after Tekiyas, and he stands by his place, and he needs to turn around, and everyone's saying, because everyone tries to see a glimpse of the Rebbe's face. Okay, let's not run ahead, because we have to have some other things of Tisha and Yom Kippur and stuff like that. We only have a few minutes left. So let's try to fit in these few minutes, encapsulate a few things here. The Rebbe went later on, after the davening, the Rebbe went to Shliach in the earlier years. Before I was born, the Rebbe used to walk far away. Then later they built the Shliach right behind 770. The Rebbe would basically just come out with his siddur and walk through the chutzner. People saw how the Rebbe said Shliach. Then, second day of Rosh HaShana was the first day, but there was a Fabrengen. Fabrengen was a special Fabrengen. It was usually a mimer about Binyan HaMalchus, about the kingdom of Hashem. And sometimes they sang all the Nigunim of the Rebbeim. After that Fabrengen, there was also Keshel Bracha, and it was a special time after 2 days of a Yom Tif like this that people had a chance to pass by the Rebbe and get another bracha of Keshel Bracha after the Fabrengen. The next day, of course, it's Tzom Gedalia, and the Rebbe on that day would also get an Aliyah to the Torah in the morning, and in the afternoon he read Torah. And after that, after Mikvah, there was always a Sicha, like there was on every fast day. And then we had a Schus. In the middle of the Ases Mechuvah was B'Av Tishrei, the Rebbe had Yartzeit. So one of the days for Rebbe's HaShana, the Rebbe's Holy Mother, and the Rebbe would actually be the Chazan. And that was the time also in the Rosh HaShana, you would hear the Rebbe say the special things that you're supposed to say on Ases Mechuvah, like Zakarin Lachai, Yimel Chopet Bachai, Yimel Chospein, Usai, Lachai, right? And then, we're just going to go ahead because Yom Kippur is itself a long story. Maybe they have to have an extra rally to talk about Yom Kippur. But before Yom Kippur, there was Lekach. Every Yom Kippur, you had a chance to get also the devil would say L'Shana Tov Mesukah and give out Lekach to everybody by his holy door. And later on, in later years, the Rebbe gave it out earlier. And actually, and told, oh, hey, I was there. I really was there. That was in Topshin and Aleph. On Bach Tishrei, the Rebbe was already giving the Lekach. And he gave it in Shul, not by his door, downstairs. And there I had the chus to get a piece of Lekach from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe would say L'Shana Tov Mesukah. And then there was something very special that I want to talk about that is different, and that is that on Erev Yom Kippur, everybody gets a bracha from their parents right before Yom Kippur starts. And in the morning of Erev Yom Kippur, of course, there was kaparas. You can see the pictures of that. That would come out with the chicken, give it to the sheikh would be shechted. The Rebbe would actually take the feathers and cover up the blood and make the bracha. I want to go to the Erev Yom Kippur. Erev Yom Kippur, the Rebbe's children is all of us, and the one who got the bracha were the Bachrim, and the Bachrim himself, Bachrim who were 22 and 23 and older, and or Chsanim, got to go in the room where the Rebbe was giving the bracha. That was something very, very special. After Mincha, the Rebbe gave a bracha to the whole Klal Yisrael. And right before Kol Nidrei, when the Rebbe was already wearing his kittel and talis, the Rebbe would go into the Beis Medrash. That's a picture that was taken before Tavshin Memches, when the Rebbe hadn't yet been Shliach, and the Rebbe would come in like that. And the Bachrim would be packed into that room. And I had the schus in Tavshin and Aleph, Tavshin and Beis, to be actually in the front row, right where the Rebbe was giving the bracha, right where I could actually see the Rebbe's face even under the things. So to go ahead now, the Rebbe went for Kol Nidrei, the Rebbe held a second Torah by Kol Nidrei, and then the davening was also very special, like the Rebbe always was. But like we said earlier, the Kohen said, there was a whole avodah. During the avodah, the Rebbe, we bowed down. That was an interesting thing on Rosh HaShana and Yom Kippur 4 times. The Rebbe went koidim, everyone would jump up and see how the Rebbe falls koidim. The Rebbe was like so easy, even when in the later years, the Rebbe would jump up. No one had to help him stand up. So and then afterwards, I just want to jump to the last thing. The Rebbe afterwards would climb up in the earlier years on his chair, and then later they made a special platform. Somebody drew a painting of it, so you see a picture how the Rebbe is standing. And the Rebbe, they would sing Napoleon's March. The Rebbe would go up and make with his hands and clap. Sometimes you would see the Rebbe crying, then his face was still very red. And the Rebbe was making so freilach. And that was called Napoleon's March. And then, so yeah, I remember one time, the Rebbe went out and said a little sikha on the street. And you're supposed to do, the next thing you're supposed to do is right away build a sukkah. So the Rebbe once said, he said, even though I'm not here cotton, I don't get build a sukkah, but the Rebbe's sukkah was already built on Motzei Yom Kippur. They said with Yom Tov, and the Bachrim already built the sukkah so that in the next morning, the Rebbe's sukkah was already up in the yard. So Mitzvah Shem, and like we said at the outset, this is not something that was, but it's something that is, and that each and every one of us could live with this and be inspired by this. And wherever we are, and you'll ask your teachers, They were there too. And whether you're in Australia or in England or in California or wherever you may be, and really, like we said, the Rebbe is with each and every one of us, and Prabhu is a Tishrei, and we should all be zoiche to hear the shofar is on Moshiach, and that's going to be blown immediately, so that the shofar of Rosh HaShana will already hear in the base of Mikdash Shliach together with the Rebbe. Everyone should have a ksiva table, the Shana table, a good kibetz yard. The gash Mr. Ruchni is gam yachat, like the Rebbe said. Ksiva table, to everybody should be inscribed and sealed for a good year and learn good. The Rebbe said always in the Bachram's bracha to learn good and to daven good and all these inyanim, because we here don't have to worry about anything else, just about those things. Thank you very much, Rabbi Goldberg, for giving me this opportunity.
Rabbi Feller, thank you very much. It was a pleasure and an honor to hear this presentation again. Yitz Hashem, I'll hear it again in the future, and we should all celebrate Rosh HaShana Yom Kippur and Sukkot Yitz Hashem together with Mashiach Tzidkenu, Yerushalayim Mir HaKodesh, Meirav Yameinu, Amen. Thank you very much.